All right. All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Kelly. I am part of the Who is Van Drew team, which is a bipartisan group that is looking to try and connect and engage with our congressman on a number of issues. Just so you know, if you're not already aware, we did attempt to have a town hall with him and we did not receive any responses back. So we decided to proceed without him and have our own town hall and talk about the issues that are important to us. He has given us glimmers of his positions here and there, but they often flip-flop. So I think that's why a lot of us are sometimes confused about where he stands. Another thing just to kind of note, again, thanks to the whole Who is Van Drew team, this has been quite from the beginning, it's been sort of nonstop and trying to organize and do things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end about how we can kind of keep this going because he will be in office for basically 2 more years. So we need to kind of keep the pressure on. We will have a lot of different guest speakers tonight. We kind of were assuming that he might not be joining us this evening, although he was certainly invited to. Some are candidates that have already announced that they are running in CD2. There are no Republican candidates that we are aware of, or they would have been more than welcome to join us and participate as well. So you will get a chance to hear from other people that live in this district and care about CD2 as well. I don't want to take up too much time, so Lori's going to be our fabulous slide person and help us throughout the evening. So we can get moving, Lori, unless there's something else you can think of to add. We're going to start with a little. I'm going to start with
on
a little
Capitol
video
Hill,
clip.
The flopping tale of a lawmaker who has switched places more than Jody and Barbara in Freaky Friday. Congressman Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey, who in 2019 co-sponsored a bill to expand voting access. At the time, he said it, quote, will clean up corruption in Washington, restore our democracy, and promote bipartisanship. But less than 2 years later, he took quite a different stance on a House ethics and election bill that is pretty much the same one he co-sponsored in the last Congress.
We were warned for years about the rise of socialism. Well, Madam Speaker, here it is, served on a platter.
Same guy, same bill, 2 opinions as different as DeVito and Schwarzenegger in Twins. What has changed, you may wonder? Well, a couple of things. First, Van Drew is now a Republican. He left the Democratic Party to become an enthusiastic Trump supporter. Watching the political wins in his New Jersey district just before Trump's first impeachment, Van Drew made the switch and even got a nice welcome party inside the White House, tailor-made for the cameras. The second thing that has changed, Republican legislatures in several states are trying to turn the big lie into law with bills that would make voting more difficult under the guise of solving a widespread voter fraud problem, which is a problem that doesn't exist outside of the truth-averse confines of Trump land. The House passed Democratic bill to stop that faced uniform Republican opposition. Democrats argue that this is pro-democracy. Republicans argue the bill is a power grab and limits political speech. Congressman Van Drew, of course, has argued both ways, and this isn't the first switcheroo for him. In 2019, he also co-sponsored an equality bill as a Democrat to protect LGBTQ Americans from discrimination. Quote, all Americans, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, must be treated equally under the law. But Republican Jeff Van Drew apparently now says, just kidding. He voted against the historic bill that would amend the 1964 Voting Rights Act bill to expand those protections to people no matter their sexual orientation or gender identity. What's that thing we learned in kindergarten? No takebacks?
Okay, so since obviously Jeff wasn't joining us tonight, we figured that might be somewhat of his opening statement if maybe he were to be here. And this was given to Jersey Matters on November 30th. This was after
the balance of power is changing.
Oh, we good, Lori? Okay. And this was a statement made by him that to Jersey Matters on November 30th. So this is post Joe Biden being officially declared the winner of the election.
Changed. If Vice President Biden prevails, then we're going to have a new president, and it's our responsibility to work with that president. When the president is right, I will support him and work with him. And when he's wrong, I'm going to disagree with him, which is what I do with any elected official. I guess I have two goals. One is to protect and stand up strong for South Jersey because it doesn't get its fair share. And then secondly, to stand up strong for the United States of America so we don't become a diminished nation.
As the global COVID-19 pandemic rages on, how residents in New Jersey live and work continues to be drastically impacted.
We need to get the governor to realize that South Jersey is significantly different than North Jersey. He has done so much, quite frankly, that's hurt South Jersey terribly. We don't have the COVID numbers that Central and Northern New Jersey does. Every other state in the union regionally opened areas, regionally opened restaurants. So we're taking little restaurants of hardworking, again, people that we care about. They're our taxpayers. They're the people that live and work in New Jersey. We're closing them down. The gyms are closing, restaurants are closing, the casinos are hurting, people are losing their jobs. There's a better way.
Van Drew says now more than ever, law enforcement needs support.
We shouldn't defund the police. I believe that was involved in some of these bills too. The police need more help so that we can work with the community more and actually have more community meetings and community service happening. There's so much we can do that's good. I just hope it really happens.
The 2nd Congressional District is the largest in New Jersey geographically. It's made up of all or portions of 8 counties. Congressman Van Drew says he's working on several issues important to local residents.
So many different things. So we want to make sure that the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority, is doing well, that the Coast Guard is getting what it needs. We want to take care of that. I want to make sure that we create more diversity in employment here, more jobs for the future. It's something that's very important. Making sure that we're number 1 in energy production, number 1 in education, making sure that we're number 1 when it comes to the supply chain. We should never, ever have to go to China.
He also wants to be a uniting voice in the nation's capital for all of South Jersey.
I don't want to see our country be diminished. It is the greatest country on the face of the earth, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. We should be proud of that. We should be proud to be American.
Okay.
Washington, D.C.
Okay. So as you can see, you've already heard from him a couple of times, just from his own words from previous clips. But part of that, well, we're going to start with Amy Kennedy tonight and talking a little bit about the 2020 election results. So as some of you might know, Amy Kennedy was a Democratic challenger for CD2 in 2020 to run against Van Drew. So Amy, okay, you're unmuted, you're there.
I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, good, I couldn't see you. Yeah, so obviously 2020 was a interesting election year. It was, a lot of people were enthusiastic about getting out to vote. Do we have a separate clip we're going to show first, Lori?
First, we just wanted to kind of go through some of the questions.
Okay.
And then we're going to play, his.
Sounds good. So one of the questions that we received, Amy, and this kind of goes to the fact that you also ran in that election, but one of the questions was why, if he was here with us, why did you refuse to accept the election results for President Biden, but accepted all the other election results, including his own? I won't go on to continue, but and also if he regrets the role that he played in participating in the big lie that continues to this day. We're what are we at? May 11th, right? And it's still a topic of discussion that's been happening. Do you have any particular comments at all in regards to those questions, Amy?
Well, I think, Jeff has shown to always do what works for him. So asking him why he would accept the results in this state but not in others, or whether he regrets making those choices, I think his answer would be no. You know, he doesn't regret those things because it's worked for him this far. And for Jeff, it's not really about principles. It's been about putting his career first. And so at a time when we were appalled that he signed on to the Texas brief, or that he objected to certifying the Electoral College results, and he made, you know, irresponsible public statements that really helped to perpetuate this. All of those things leading up to voting against the impeachment of Donald Trump have continued to serve Jeff in the way that he's been just looking to consolidate his base. And so when he talks about all those things that we'd like to be focused on, education, new jobs for South Jersey, I think we can all agree. I know that's what Bridget was pushing for in the primary. I know that's what Tim wants to do. These are the things we all want to see. He's just not acting on it. We're not getting results from him. He's there to continue his career, and he hasn't really delivered because he doesn't stand for those things. That's not what he went there to do. He went there to stay in office.
Right. Yeah, and there was, I forget exactly when it was published, but it wasn't that long ago, but the quote of the day, I'll kind of read it from Matt Friedman, who does the New Jersey Politico during this sort of time of the big lie. But he had put, "I hope everyone will wake up to how scary this is for our future, and I hope this legislation fails miserably as it would end the republic as we know it." And that was Jeff Van Drew, who supported, overturning the 2020 election results, even, after the mob attack, the Trump supporters and the riot at the Capitol and all of that, where it's just sort of, it's just of how this is even a thing, I think, for most people. Just, it's always been about you elect who you want, and then in the end, there's a winner, whether you agree with those results or not, as we had to deal with for 4 years of the outcome of that previous election. So we do have a clip, I believe, though, of Jeff talking here too. Lori wants to cue that one up.
That there was a breach of the Capitol, and that the Congress people and also the senators tried to get back and did get back to their offices or into safe havens and actually left the floor. We were in the process of discussing the electors and debating the rule of law, and debating the idea that we need to have safe and free elections. And we were well into that issue, which is appropriate. And then all of this started to happen, which was, of course, a great surprise. It's not the America we know or the America we love, and we don't want to see that. And that does not represent most of the people who are involved in that organization. But evidently, there were some people there that were violent, and that's something that is not and should not ever be accepted, period. Something that we can't do. So that's something that obviously I don't agree with. Why do I think it's happened? Because I think in any organization, unfortunately, sometimes some people can get involved with it that don't understand how they should behave, the rule of law, the importance of not doing things like this, and take the organization to a place where it shouldn't be. And it hasn't only happened with this organization, it's happened with others. Look, everybody understands that in the election process, people get frustrated, people get aggravated, but that does not ever, ever, ever condone violence. Violence is something that is not acceptable, or is it necessary in our country? And that's what we want to make sure. That's why the importance of even the meeting today, to make sure that in America, people always feel that elections are the way that they make change, not through violence. Violence is the way that other countries do it.
not the United States of America.
Right. I'm sure you have comments to that, but some of the things that even stick out to me is, like this was a surprise, and it really wasn't. It was being talked about for so long about, okay, this state, we're going to go there. And, so it really should not have been any sort of surprise. And,
No.
talking about a free and fair election, and then this is what they're doing. So I don't know if you have any comments to that video or if you had seen that before.
I think he talks about the danger to our democracy when we're proposing legislation. The danger to our democracy is in the speech that he's given in supporting the lies. And he had run a campaign promising this bipartisanship and working with people on both sides of the aisle. Unfortunately, the reality was that he helped to perpetuate all of this and really mislead people in a way that inspired this kind of insurrection. And instead of working to help solve the real problems that people are facing, he aligned himself with the right-wing radical, and people that would deny the legitimacy of this presidential election, an election that had nothing to do with him.
Right. Well, thank you very much for adding your insight, because obviously you had some experience with that in 2020. So,
Yeah.
we all have to live with the consequences of what had happened. And so,
well, as hard as that was to watch, that day was terrifying and so difficult to watch from home. I think it's scarier still that he's missing in action on the really big issues that are facing our country right now.
Right. Agree. Well, thank you. If you stick around, we have some questions probably at the end if we have time, that I know, and there's probably some in the chat that I'm not even seeing at the moment too, but appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Good to see everyone.
Well, that there was a breach of the Capitol, and
Okay. We're gonna, okay. Are we moving to, okay. We had to rearrange the order, so I'm just trying to make sure I know where where we're going with it.
Hector is our next speaker.
Okay. All right, yeah. Okay, so our next topic is safety at our nation's capital, which we talked a little bit about with Amy as well. But our panelist on this topic is Hector Tavares. He is a retired police captain from Egg Harbor Township and is currently the founder and executive director of the Egg Harbor Township Police Activities League. Hector is one of the candidates that is running for Democratic nomination for NJ-2 seat in 2022. So Hector, thank you for joining us. I'm not sure if you're unmuted already, or
I think I am unmuted, and Kelly
Okay.
and Lori, thank you very much for having me on. You guys are doing a great job.
No, thank you for coming with us to this, since since we didn't know if we would have Jeff here or not. We figured we might as well have people who are interested in CD2 attend here. But we did actually receive quite a few questions in regards to this, because obviously this is still sort of fresh on everybody's mind. January was not that long ago, but in some ways feels like a really long time ago. But currently, you might even see playing out within the Republican Party. Some of the questions were about, like, Liz Cheney. She was one who stood by and basically said, "This election is over. I'm going to certify this election." January 6th was completely inappropriate, and people stirred that pretty much. And so if he were to be here, one of the questions was for him, like, do you agree with her stance that was completely inappropriate and the election it's done, it's over with? And he's obviously not here to answer that. There was a resident in Salem County that had asked him that question. And before I pass it on to you, the other question that was there was, since the election, we have seen increased violent events, incredible threats against our nation's capital. and why is he so focused on undoing the safety precautions that were set in place at the time. For a long time, there was National Guard there was extra fences, barriers in order to protect, and he even posted about sending them home, that it's time for them to go home, they're safe, and he had quite a bit of quotes in there. If anyone wants to look that up to read it, it's extensive, so I'm not going to waste everybody's time with that. But basically, he was saying that, everything's fine, everybody can go home. And then that same day, a man ended up being arrested outside of Vice President Harris's residence with an AR-15. So it's kind of, I think sometimes it's a bit of a front on his end. And I want to just say one more thing before I pass it to you to kind of respond, because this was one of his responses to some of those events. But on March 19th, Jeff Van Drew released the statement regarding enhanced security at the Capitol. That same day, like I said, the man was arrested, and this is what he said. The U.S. Capitol is a standing testament to the freedom and democracy we uniquely enjoy as Americans. By putting armed guardsmen and razor wire between our citizens and the heart of our government, we are in effect separating America from Americans. The U.S. Capitol Police have already stated there are no credible threats to Congress or the Capitol complex that warrants this unnecessary show of force. It is time to remove the fencing and restore access to the American people. Anything less is unacceptable. And then again, less than 2 weeks later, a man rammed his car into the barricades, right, killing an officer there. So it's just kind of another sign of his flawed judgment or inability to see, I think, the risk that's there. So I don't know what you can add to kind of the security that we're facing at the national level there.
No, well, thank you very much. As you mentioned earlier, I do have a background in law enforcement, having served 25 years on the Egg Harbor Township Police Force and serving in numerous roles, eventually retiring as a captain. The insurrection on the 6th was actually the triggering incident that really made me seriously consider, and eventually I decided that I was going to run for the Democratic nomination. I also drove to Washington, D.C. Because I wanted to see what our Capitol looked like. And my wife and I took a drive there, and honestly, it was very sad to see what our Capitol looked like. Since, it's been, a little bit of time since the insurrection, and we're learning a lot more about it. And you mentioned earlier that, like, who didn't know that this was about to happen? I think everybody pretty much knew. And as the investigations continue and we look into why we didn't have the appropriate response, we're probably going to learn some things that are going to be very scary on the part of what our president at the time did or did not do. Some of the studies that are coming out now, I think, though, are pretty indicative of a lot of our law enforcement around the country. And what some of the reports are saying is that the Capitol Police were understaffed and they're undertrained. And I can say that many, if not all, of local law enforcement is exactly in that situation, is that they are understaffed. And by many estimates, some agencies are understaffed by as much as 30%, somewhere between 20 and 30%. So what does that do when a law enforcement agency is understaffed? Well, guys are being required to work a lot of overtime. And in the case of the Capitol Police, in the year 2020, the Capitol Police worked an amazing 720,000 hours of overtime. They were understaffed by almost 250 officers. And that's to do a task that did not involve civil insurrection. I mean, I don't think that it was really on anybody's radar to think that, hey, this incident is going to take place. And so it's on their radar now. They have to prepare for it. And what do they have to do to prepare for it? Well, the first thing is they have to hire a lot of officers. There are 200, I believe it's 233 vacancies just to do the task that they were prepared to do prior to the insurrection. Now they have to prepare for domestic uprisings. That requires a lot more people. I think the recommendation from one of the panels was to increase the staffing by a little over 800 people. So if you can imagine having to pay 720,000 hours of overtime, how understaffed and how much we're asking from these officers to do. In 2021, I believe in the first 5 months, they were already at 55% of what happened in 2020. So this is a situation that we have all over the country. And I, for one, coming from law enforcement, and I think Tim will agree with me, is unfunding or defunding our police is not what we need to do. One of the things as a young officer, when we would sit in briefings, we would always complain because it seemed that almost every day we were giving something new to do. So on top of our normal law enforcement responsibilities, we were given more work and more work and more work, and we never had added officers. What scares me and what scared me when I went to the Capitol is that we are supposed to be a free country. The last thing I want is a Capitol that's surrounded by barbed wire and fences. And so part of our solution is not only supporting our law enforcement, but we actually need elected officials who are not contributing to the problem, like our Congressman, Mr. Van Drew. The day that he pledged his undying loyalty to the president, I was probably one of the most nauseating days for me. And when I watched that, I kind of envisioned a court jester bowing down to a king. And it's just not what our country was intended to do. And I was so embarrassed to say that was our congressman. So, yeah.
I know, it put a spotlight on us that we didn't really want.
I
Right,
think he really did not represent us well. And I was honestly embarrassed. That was kind of the first straw that got me thinking that we need to get somebody in there that actually represents the people. And I agree with Amy. Jeff is all about Jeff. There is nothing. I think in one of his press releases he said, I hope it really happens. And I can't help but think to myself, hope is an incredible thing. And one of the things that I'm realizing as I travel around the district, I'm hearing from a lot of families and a lot of kids, especially, saying that they don't really have hope for the future. But to have our congressman say that he hopes, hopes. No, what are you doing? What are you working toward improving our district and protecting the republic? And in my opinion, he's doing absolutely nothing but hoping. And a congressman should not be hoping, he should be working for us.
Right. Thank you so much for helping us tonight and trying to fill in some pieces and gaps since he's not here with us this evening. It was nice to meet you virtually anyway. Hopefully I'll see you around.
Well, hopefully we get to meet everybody and we can put the pandemic behind us.
That would be nice. Thanks again, Hector. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So moving on to the Equality Act, will be our panelist for the Equality Act is Heather Warburton. Heather is an artist and activist from South Jersey. She hosts a bi-weekly podcast on Create Your Future Productions called Wine, Women, and Revolution, where she discusses revolutionary politics from an intersectional feminist perspective. She has been a Green Party member since 2016. Her activism has included fighting for a living wage, educating on income inequality, supporting ecological justice, advocating for the LGBTQIA community, hosting education sessions about cannabis legislation, and promoting racial justice. So you're really busy, Heather.
Yes, yeah, I definitely am.
You keep yourself busy, huh? Yeah. Well, thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm really glad to be here, especially to talk about something really important like this.
I was going to say, it seems like this topic fits you perfectly. Let me just run through a little bit of the questions and stuff here, and we can get into it. I know there was a resident in Atlantic County who stated, or I guess a question for Jeff. As a Democrat in 2019, Jeff Van Drew voted in support of the Equality Act, but now as a Republican, he opposes it. Is he voting the will of the voters in this district, or is he voting only in favor of the party and its leaders, or maybe where the money's coming from? So that was one question that somebody had. And another one asked, in Cape May County, many states are trying to ban transgender athletes from competing in sports. In California, where those athletes are allowed to compete, it's shown to be a non-issue, and wondering where he lands on that issue. Obviously, he's not quite here, but if you see on the slide, in the past, he has said a couple of things. As a state senator in 2012, Jeff Van Drew was anti-gay marriage in New Jersey and actually used that issue to drive the vision in that particular Senate election. And then in 2019, he co-sponsored the Equality Act. And in 2021, he voted against it. Nearly identical bills. So quite a difference in 3 years of, changing his opinion on that. He did, I believe, let me say, overall, it's just been to get a clear message on where he exactly stands on any of this. Heather, do you have any kind of response or for these residents in regards to these issues?
Absolutely. Well, first I wanted to start off with that I use she, her pronouns, and that I was one of the original OG Van Drew haters. I really disliked Van Drew back before it was cool to dislike Van Drew. And part of that was because of his track record on LGBTQ voting or rights. And, he has a long history of being really bad for this. And possibly in the future, I'm hoping to challenge him and take the seat away from him and give it to someone who stands for LGBTQ rights. I really did want to thank you guys for giving me such an easy topic tonight. Talking about this was really simple. And when you said I had 5 minutes to speak for the Equality Act, I was like, how am I going to fill the time, right?
I know.
To say trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are non-binary, and Jeff Van Drew's a jerk. And so I decided to talk in the rest of my time tonight about knowing yourself. And, we rattled off my introductions like it was nothing, and everyone accepted that. No one tried to tell me that my name wasn't Heather or that I wasn't an activist. And I recognize the privilege that that entails, because our trans and non-binary siblings don't get that luxury. Even though they're the true authority on themselves, they constantly kind of have to prove their existence to people like Jeff Van Drew, because he believes that he knows people better than they know themselves. And really, I think Van Drew is the one that doesn't know himself. And that's how he can say one thing one day and the entirely opposite thing the next day.
Right.
He doesn't have a consistent set of morals and values that he can use kind of to guide himself to what's right and what's wrong. So he gets himself caught up in spinning in this Republicans have to say this and Democrats have to say this. And how's this stance going to affect my polling numbers? And if I say this, will I be electable? And, stuff like that just drives me crazy. Even though I'm very engaged in politics, political parties complicate simple concepts sometimes.
Right.
And the Equality Act should be really simple. It doesn't need all these loopholes or exclusions or addendums. Trans men are men, trans women are women, and non-binary people are non-binary. And no one should be discriminated against anywhere. End of bill. That's really all we need.
It seems factual. There it is. It doesn't have to be 300 pages long, right? It's just, this is it.
And we can't compromise on people's rights or, on your values and beliefs, no matter what someone with a D or an R or whatever letter says. And I remember back when Van Drew was a Democrat, and he was talking to an LGBTQIA activist who was pressing him on his track record of being horrible on LGBT rights. And what he said to her was, well, I joined the committee. What more do you want? And he was referring to the LGBTQ plus Equality Caucus. And I can't speak for that activist, but I assume they wanted him to actually stand for something, to like take a position that he knows deep inside of himself is the right thing and stick with it. And to, take the journey to figure out who he really was and not let polling numbers make him compromise that, because these are issues of life and death a lot of the times. I could list
Right.
statistics that like 41% of Black trans people have been homeless, or 34% of Black trans people have household incomes of less than $10,000, which is more than 8 times the general population.
Right.
Or nearly half of Black trans population has attempted suicide. I'm guessing everyone here already gets the gravity of these issues, even if Jeff Van Drew doesn't.
Right.
So,
Right.
in
Yeah,
close-
and I guess part of it is like getting that, like how do you then have people understand that, right? I think that sometimes, or like you said, he might tell you this is where he stands on this issue now, and this is where it is. Like sometimes it just it seems like person to person, like like he might say something to me and something to somebody else. It doesn't even have to be a lot of time in between. It's just, like you said, it's pretty much this is it. It's factual. It shouldn't be complicated at all.
Yeah, it really is. People, we should respect people. We should accept people on the authorities of themselves. And I don't know why he's unable to do that, why he thinks he knows better than everyone else what they need for themselves. But, to any of my trans or non-binary siblings today, I just wanted to say that I see you, I accept you, I appreciate you. And, Jeff Van Drew is a jerk.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate you coming to talk on this topic because, like you said, it's something that's sort of near and dear to your heart. And obviously, based on just the introduction, you can see you put a lot of effort in not just doing the work, but getting the word out too. And I think that that is really important to do. So appreciate you taking the time to join us. And I know from the very beginning, you can wear that proud sticker that you're original, no Jeff Van Drew person. I know it.
Thanks again, guys.
Thank you. Okay, great. Okay, so, all right. So next up,
Representative.
Oh, okay.
We just have a little little break, and this is just an ad that the Working Families Party put together that really kind of kicks off HR 1 and what that's about, and Jeff's vote on that.
Representative Van Drew voted against the For the People Act, which would reduce big money in politics, strengthen the fight against corruption, and protect the right to vote. 67% of Americans support the For the People Act. So why did Representative Van Drew vote against it? Seems like Representative Van Drew didn't mind keeping big donors in charge. Politicians should work for us, not wealthy donors. Click to sign our petition or text democracy to 30403.
Okay, that's a great ad. So our next topic is HR 1 For the People Act, and with us tonight to kind of discuss this topic is Tim Alexander. Tim is one of the Democratic challengers for Jeff Van Drew's seat in 2022. He is a New Jersey native. He earned his BS in Business Management from Drexel University, an MBA from Drexel University Labatt College of Business, and a JD from Rutgers University School of Law in Camden. As a survivor of police brutality himself, Tim became law enforcement officer and has worked in many areas, including in the prosecution offices, and now is in private practice helping with civil litigations. Tim and his wife, Anna, have been married for 34 years, and they have 3 children. Tim, are you there and unmuted?
I am on both counts.
All right, cool. Thank you. Before we get talking a little bit, I'm just going to read some of the questions that we received, and we had to condense a lot of them are repetitive, but one of the questions that someone wanted to ask the congressman if he was here, and they're from Salem County. In 2019, you were a co-sponsor of the For the People Act and DC statehood. Now that you have switched parties, you voted against them. How can the voters know what side of the issue you truly stand for? And another resident in Cape May County asked, if HR 1 takes the big money out of politics, why are you against it? Voters on both sides of the aisle support this. It's really not a partisan thing. It doesn't take money away from one side and not the other. And then just, for people, I didn't know if you were going to talk about it at all, but part of the For the People Act, again, it makes voter registration more easily accessible. It, again, tries to take money out of politics, limit states from purging voter rolls and things like that. So it's really for the ease and access to let anybody, no matter what party, Green Party, unaffiliated, Republicans, to vote. And again, it was something that he had supported, and then all of a sudden now is completely against. Did we have a clip too for that one, Lori, or?
So we have a clip here. This clip, it doesn't actually speak to HR 1 specifically. This is actually a little candid meeting he had with the Save Jersey vlogger named Matt Rooney. I'm sure some of you have seen him on Twitter. He's pretty active on Twitter. This is just an off-the-cuff interview with him, and he actually is just talking a little bit about the Georgia elections here. And I just thought this was a little bit of an eye-opening clip as to how Jeff's thinking these days. So I'm going to play this.
Okay, thanks.
Atlanta, because they're so horrified about a bill they never understood or read. That just says you have to have an ID, basically. That was a huge, horrible, terrible thing about it. The President Biden doesn't even understand.
And let's also be clear: if a state in the union started, saying we're going to have a poll tax or a literacy test or something like that, you and I would be right out there.
Absolutely, absolutely,
there's no
absolutely. Everybody who wants to vote should have the right to vote. We just have to make sure that it's a real vote and it's the real person. That's all. Just know it's you.
Doesn't matter how much money you make.
Do whatever you want.
Ethnic background, but
exactly. But here's the deal. So they're not going to be in Atlanta, and Coca-Cola is being critical. But particularly, what really got me is like Major League Baseball and these sports teams, because then they turn around and they make deals with China for sports products that they sell, sneakers, other stuff. And China is literally incarcerating Islamic people within its country, torturing them in concentration camps, killing them. But that's okay. That's okay. We'll do business. Absolutely. Yeah. That's okay. And we're doing business with that. So there's no sense to this even. I don't have any comprehension of what are they thinking. Everybody's so scared. Coca-Cola's scared. Major League Baseball's scared. You know what? If I was, and I'm sure I'd be fired. I believe at a baseball game or at a football game that every player who's been so darn lucky to have that position, quite frankly, and make the money they do, you stand up, you put your hand on your heart, you pledge allegiance to this flag and to this country that has given you so much, and you can still have all your own ideas. That's a
Okay, thanks for stopping that one, Laurie. All right, Tim, I'm gonna pass this one on to you to kind of follow up on HR 1 and For the People. And again, thank you so much for participating with us tonight.
And thank you for having me, Kelly and Laurie and Helen and everyone who organized this. This is an excellent event, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I mean, the setup, though, it certainly got me charged up, and I have to take some deep breaths here to start unpacking all this. So I'll start with talking about HR 1, which is now in the Senate S1, and actually today was a Rules Committee meeting that I think broke 7-7. So it's in a bit of a jam right now. Hopefully we could get past that. The bill, it does establish its basic intent is to make it easier to vote, to allow same-day registration in federal elections, to make the federal election day a holiday, to remove dark money, as is commonly referred to in elections. And someone asked why. I think one of the posts questioned why would he be opposed to it. Well, look at his first quarter reporting where he posted $500,000. Mr. Van Drew doesn't want to talk about where all that money came from, even though we know some came from Matt Gaetz. And we know what type of person or character Mr. Gaetz is purported to have right now. And so, he obviously will oppose it because the Republican Party opposes it. And where I'm going with that is Mr. Van Drew has the political backbone of water, and he just doesn't have the capability to stand up for New Jerseyans, for South Jerseyans, or for what's right. And he's a political chameleon, and that he changes to whatever he thinks is going to enable him to continue with his 20 plus years as a politician. So we just don't have a representative whose interest is, or put our interest before his own. And that's one of the reasons why I entered this race. There's, there were so many good things that were discussed by Amy and by Hector earlier that I tend to agree with respect to his just overall lack of urgency for the people who sent him to the office. So to your point about the bill, some of the other things, it also, which is kind of important to us right now, it will establish commissions on redistricting to prevent gerrymandering, or at least make it difficult for gerrymandering. And as we are coming out of the census and we're now going to start drawing new lines, I think that's very critical. And why Mr. Van Drew would switch sides, have no idea with regard to wanting to be a Republican, because that's not something I can envision myself doing. So, but I would imagine that in doing so, he cannot be for a bill like this, because this is going to create voting equality across the nation. And here, just to end with this little piece that was played in a clip about voter ID, and he talked about, hey, it's just having a driver's license or some form of ID, and he knows all the problems associated with that, with some of the more rural areas and rural states where people have lack of access and transportation. Totally ignores that, and then he turns around and says to people who have talent that allow or enable them to be part of major sporting franchises, that they ought to be grateful because they're there, as if he's allowing them to be there, or there's some segment of society that allows them to do that. It's absolutely nonsense. And what amount of money or what job do you have that says, okay, you set aside your rights to the Constitution to protest, and I'm assuming that's what he was referring to, because you make a lot of money, so you should just be quiet. It's almost identical to McConnell's position, where he fought for corporations to be recognized as individuals, and the Supreme Court gave him that. And then when they start speaking out against them in the same area, well, they ought to just shut up and do whatever it is that they're doing, but keep giving us money. So I'll end it with that the hypocrisy of, and somebody told me when I first got into this race, don't get caught up on the hypocrisy of politics because you'll go crazy. But that does make me crazy, and so I accept that only because it's just so frustrating and infuriating. And like I said, I'll end up talking to you all night, so I'll shut up with that.
Well, no, I mean, I agree with you. I think we want to think like the best of people, and that they're not there won't be that hypocrisy there, but it does seem to always happen. And I try to be an optimist that when somebody says something, that's their word, right? So they're going to support the Equality Act, or they're going to support these certain legislations, and you trust that is what they're going to support. And it seems like in this particular case, time and time again, I've been let down by everything that has been said that he would support, and ultimately turns out not. So and like you said, this is and even a lot of these other issues, they really are bipartisan. Like everybody should have the right to vote, no matter what party you are a part of. So it's really discouraging when people make it more than what it is in that sense. But I appreciate your time and participating with us. It was nice meeting you virtually. Hopefully I'll see you in person at some point.
Absolutely. And it was really my pleasure to be here. And I'd like to stick around for a little while as well.
Yeah, please do. Because if we have a little time, we'll get to some more questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. All right. On to gun safety. This was another topic of mine where I was told one thing and kind of getting the feel that it's the opposite. Our panels for gun safety is Carolyn Rush. Carolyn is also currently running as a Democratic candidate in CD2. She is a resident of Sea Isle City, a mother of 5, and grandmother of 3. And she is an engineer with the US government. Carolyn, are you there and unmuted?
I believe that I am unmuted.
Oh, yes, you are. Awesome.
Okay.
I'm just going to share some of the questions we got in regard to gun safety, and then I'm going to pass it along to you, and we can kind of discuss it a little bit more. So some of the questions that came in, according to recent polling, 84% of voters across the political spectrum support universal background checks. And yet, March of 2021, you voted against the bill, despite having voted for it in 2019. We saw that 3 Republicans signed onto the bill, so it wasn't a party line vote. What's his reasoning basically for switching his vote and not supporting the majority of the American people? And someone else, a mom in Gloucester County, just wanted to know how many kids have to be killed before we can see the country take action on assault-style military weapons. So, and this is one of the issues that I touched upon with the congressman in the first election when he ran as a Democrat. This was a big issue for me, and I spoke with him several times about his stance on universal background checks, banning of bump stocks, reciprocity, all these types of issues that were important for gun reform. And he was for a lot of these things. He was against some in his belief in the Second Amendment, but he was for common sense gun reform for the most part. And it just seems like that is now not necessarily the case. And as you can see, he's on a lot of different shows now on Fox and other networks. You know, the great American gun grab, you know, we're going to just take everybody's guns away and rip everybody from their Second Amendment right. So there is a clip from there, I believe, from that one, because this is from Newsmax.
Left's gun grab, and welcoming New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew now. Congressman Van Drew is a member of the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, great to see you.
It's great to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, we've heard so much from Democrats, and we've talked a lot about their desire to do a lot of this stuff without any Republican support. I can't imagine there is any or much Republican support for any of these gun control measures. I know 8 members of the Republican House members did sign on to one of their gun control measures. But what did you think of the president's speech yesterday and what he wants to do? He says no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think 2 things were obvious yesterday, at least 2 things. One, he doesn't understand the Constitution, which is hard to believe for somebody that has spent so much time in government. But the Constitution is what guides us through, you know, governing our nation. And I don't like those words because those words seem to indicate the beginning of no longer following or listening or understanding or caring about the United States Constitution. That is extremely dangerous and leads us down a very bad road. He's wrong. It is absolute. It is clear. There is a Second Amendment right. It's not complicated.
Okay. I guess thanks for sharing that, Laurie. He is now a frequent guest on Newsmax as well. I think he's made himself home there. He's there quite a bit. But yeah, any response? I know you've talked about, and I guess gun safety and gun reform has been something that's been important to you as well. So, I mean, I don't know if you're just as frustrated as I am and other people are, where it's you hear one thing and then he no longer seems to support it.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that he can flip-flop on so many things, and especially when you're talking gun control, and it's so important to so many people that have lost people to gun violence. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's not even, like I said, it's even people that are for the Second Amendment, right? They still support common sense, universal
Exactly.
background check. Like, it's not, it's like we're making something up, but it's, we have to do certain things in order to drive. And why are we not doing certain things to own a deadly weapon? So it is sort of baffling how he could. And this was one of the big sticking points I had with him back in that first election, that when he went, ended up winning as the Democrat, was this, particular position that he had. And I was always wary of his responses, but again, I guess just trying to be an optimist and believe that what he was saying was accurate. And he did for a while, seem to support and vote for certain things. And then again, switches parties. So therefore the whole platform just changes.
Right.
It's incredible, pretty disturbing.
It's very disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did have a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you. First, I wanted to thank you, though, for inviting me to join this panel. I am very grateful to be here and have this opportunity to share. I think that you and your team have done a wonderful job pulling this all together.
Thank you.
I think perhaps, though, that it is Congressman Van Drew who doesn't understand the Constitution. The exact wording of the Second Amendment is this: a well-regulated militia being necessary to secure for the security of a free state has the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's it. That's all it says. When the Constitution was written, bearing arms meant having muskets and flintlock pistols. No one's trying to take away anybody's muskets. But what we should, however, be trying to take away is your AK-47s and your AR-15s. Currently, the National Firearms Act prohibits citizens from possessing grenades, missile launchers, weapons of mass destruction, and thank God, we're not allowed to arm ourselves with things like that. And I don't hear anyone complaining that it is an infringement on their Second Amendment rights. Now we need to ban automatic high-capacity weapons. It was done in the past, and it needs to be done again. And it won't violate anyone's Second Amendment rights. So no one's trying to change the Constitution here. But what we do need to do is apply some common sense to the Second Amendment. There's no denying that gun violence is a huge problem in our society, more so than anywhere else in the world. About 20 years ago, I served as a juror on a murder trial, and a gun had been used in the commission of that crime. During the voir dire process, I was asked by the judge how I felt about gun control. It was something that I hadn't given much thought to, and without really thinking about it, I said, I'm fine with the books that are, with the laws that are on the books. Now, fast forward 20 years, and my position has changed drastically. Maybe it's because inner city gun violence is in the news every day, with young people and innocent bystanders getting hurt and killed. Maybe it's because mass shootings have become so commonplace that they no longer even shock us. Just this past weekend, there were 9 mass shootings. After the 2018 shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School in Florida, I was very moved by the actions of the student activists. I went to DC and participated in the March for Our Lives. I thought for sure our legislators would do something about gun violence. How could they possibly listen to these passionate young people and not be moved to take action? Sadly, all we got were thoughts and prayers, not meaningful legislation. We all remember the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting. I recently learned that in 2013, then State Senator Van Drew was the only Democrat to vote against a series of gun control bills. Now, more recently, HR 1446 was brought to the floor of the House. This is a bill that strengthened background checks. And as was mentioned in the Newsmax piece that we just watched, it passed on March 11th with 8 Republican votes, but not surprisingly, Congressman Van Drew wasn't one of them. Politicians like Congressman Van Drew usually provide the following 3 reasons for opposing gun legislation. It either violates your Second Amendment rights, guns don't kill people, people kill people, or criminals won't pay attention to gun laws, so why bother? Now, universal background checks, red flag laws, and assault weapons bans won't violate anyone's Second Amendment rights. After all, who needs a high-capacity, semi-automatic weapon to protect the family or to hunt for a deer? And when they say guns don't kill people, people kill people, well, it's a good argument. Shouldn't we then be working to find out why people are killing people? I've heard that a principal impediment to discovering effective solutions to gun violence is a lack of sufficient federal research dollars to support comprehensive data collection through unbiased scientific study. And the same politicians who oppose gun laws are also opposed to funding an NIH study to look into the causes of gun violence. How hypocritical. Now, as far as criminals who won't pay attention to gun laws, if you follow that logic, then why even bother making theft, rape, or even murder illegal? These arguments are so weak. Let's look at what the average citizen thinks. In 2019, a Politico poll found that 70% of Americans support an assault weapons ban, and that includes 86% of Democrats and 54% of Republicans. And an NPR PBS NewsHour poll found that 83% of Americans believe Congress should pass legislation requiring background checks for gun purchases at gun shows and other private sales. Now, these are common sense ideas. It's also worth noting that during his congressional campaign, Congressman Van Drew had a 100% rating from the NRA. It's also worth noting that Congressman Van Drew received multiple campaign contributions from the NRA. I think we, those of us on this call, can all agree that something needs to be done about the gun violence. Based on his record and his affiliation with the NRA, I think we can guess where Congressman Van Drew stands on the issues. If he attended this town hall or hosted one of his own, we wouldn't have to guess. Plus, if he was here, the voters of the 2nd Congressional District could tell him how we really feel.
Agree. Yes, thank you so much for that. Again, it's been one of my main topics, you know, and just like you, the March for Our Lives movement was really uplifting in a sense, and you know, leaves you hopeful for a time being, and then sometimes you see it just, you know, I do still think, although it's not, it didn't bring about what I hoped it would, but it brought about more people, I think.
There's
to
momentum.
This movement, right? So I'm still hopeful that we are getting there. So thank you so much for joining us and talking on this topic. It was really important to do so.
It was my pleasure, and thank you again for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Okay. Moving on to racial justice, HR 1280. Our panelist is Crystal Hutchinson. Crystal is a first grade teacher and mother of 5. Racial and social justice are some of her passions in life. She's currently the co-chair of the Racial Justice Committee of Cape May County Indivisible. She sits on the Middle Township's Social Justice Committee, the secretary of Middle Township's Democrat Club, a member of the Cape Atlantic Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement through the New Jersey court system. And as a teacher, she is part of resiliency and diversity committees in her school district. As a member of her local chapter of the NAACP and Progress Black Initiative of Whitesboro, she works within the community to help facilitate more equitable conditions for Black and Brown members of the community. Hopefully you're there, Crystal, and I'll be able to hear you. Okay, cool.
Hi.
Boy,
Thanks for
you
having
keep
me.
yourself busy too.
Yeah.
No, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. I just want to start off again with just some of the questions we received on this particular topic. and then a little bit more, and then I'd like to open it up to you to hear your thoughts. But a resident in Atlantic County had asked, many people of color are afraid of the police, and rightfully so. Far too many people of color are killed and have had experienced excessive force used against them by police. What actions will you take to stop this epidemic of racist attitudes? And then a resident in Gloucester County asked, Derek Chauvin was found guilty of all 3 counts of murder for taking the life of George Floyd. Do you agree with that verdict? Which is interesting, because just asking like what seems to be a very simple question, I think he would have a hard time actually answering. I do want to just note real quick before I pass it to you, on the right side, there's a long quote from Jeff Van Drew. I'm going to read a bit of it, but basically he posted on his Facebook page, and he was mainly focusing his attention to a member of the squad, if you will. It really wasn't even much about policing or anything like that. It was more of a targeted, I guess, attack. But he called, so it was focused on a member of the squad who called for an end to policing and incarceration, which is not the platform of the mainstream Democratic Party. But his words work to further divide us by focusing on a single member of Congress instead of really the issues that are there. It seems like he believes that Congress should be an agency for change and reform, but when given the opportunity, he then voted against the George Floyd Policing Act, which again doesn't end policing, it just enacts some common sense police reforms. So I'm curious, Crystal, with all the work that you've done in this particular issue and field, what are your thoughts on this topic and, you know, Jeff's stance?
I feel like the common theme of this whole thing has been that he doesn't have a stance on anything. He just says whatever and does whatever for the people in front of him. But it does also seem that he is just actually not for any type of racial equality or equality in, you know, the LGBTQ community. You know, if I were to think of the answer to his questions, I don't think that he would agree with the George Floyd verdict. And I don't think that he wants to take any actions against changing the attitudes of among racist police forces, because this is, you know, part of racism is ingrained in, you know, in our Constitution, in how the nation was built. And people who, like Van Drew, don't want it to change because it helps them. It helps him. He's a mediocre white man. It helps him. So, you know, I don't think that he's for our community, for the Black and brown people. You know, that he's not in it to help us. You know, we have to kind of help ourselves. So.
Right. And I think like some of all these other topics too, it comes down to what seems to be just common sense and factual thing. Like, what would be wrong with the George Floyd Act? Like, you know, with racial justice change and policing reform, like there's nothing in there. I mean, really what it's asking, you know, for is to hold police officers accountable when they should be held accountable, right? And to change certain aspects, whether it's training and so on. So it's kind of, I guess, baffling to me that doesn't seem like that should be something that should happen. Like, you know, it seems to make sense to do that. If it were in any other fields, right? If it was in any other topic, you would think, okay, yeah, we should hold these teachers accountable, right? We should hold these social workers accountable. We should hold all these other people accountable for these types of behaviors. But why are we not also looking to do it with police officers and police reform? So, you know, I guess it kind of goes with Carolyn's comment before, like, you know, people, you know, guns don't kill people, people kill people. You know, I hear a lot of the times one of the common things is, well, not all police officers are bad. Well, fine. Like, that's great. That's accurate. Nobody's saying all police officers are bad. But there's a system that's broken and needs to be fixed. So why are we against that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where the struggle comes in.
Yes, yes. I mean, I agree. I think that you can be for police and against police brutality. And I feel like that is kind of, where I am.
Right.
I support good police who protect our community. And I 100% condemn police who harass our community, who, beat up my Black brothers and sisters, who kill them. A lot of times, like, there needs to be a police reform, because the conversation that I have with a lot of people is, well, it's not just Black people who are being murdered. And you're right. You're right. The problem, a big part of the problem is with the police. The system is broken. We need to, reform the police, and, that'll be integrated. Racial justice hopefully would come in that with better training and
right.
So, but it seems that if anything makes sense, that Van Drew he doesn't want to do it anyway.
Right.
So,
because the money won't be there for him when he wants to run again, pretty much. But yeah, and I think, like you said, like, once the system's changed and there's reform, then people can look at, that, I don't know what you want to call it, but about all bad cops or anything. Like, you would think that the good cops would want to help fix this and change it so that it is looked at as a group that can be held accountable and trusted. And so, again, it's kind of like with the other thing. I'm hopeful, in a sense, there might be some change around the corner. It's going to be slow, I think, but
I don't know. I mean, here they get to, hide behind qualified immunity. So,
right.
Getting, that also needs to be worked on as well,
right, which is part of that bill. Yeah. Yeah. So ending that would be a big part of it. Do you have any last words in regards to this particular topic? I know that you probably could talk about it for a while.
Talk about it all day.
I know, and probably at times, probably almost tired of talking about it, right? Like, sometimes it's just.
I think I'm tired of talking about it, I guess, with people who don't really understand my position. Like, I feel like I'm in a perpetual argument, like somebody.
Right.
And for me as a person, like, I can't just let it go. Like, I have to try to educate the person a little bit more. It could be a personality flaw of mine. However, so yeah, I guess I don't really have anything else to add. Maybe if there's some questions later, I'll stick around.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Crystal. I appreciate
Thank you for having me.
us. I know how busy you are.
That's all right.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Another big topic that we kept running into was in regards to American Jobs Plan that is out there. Our panelist for this is Dr. Bridget Callahan Harrison. Bridget is a recognized scholar, leading author, and noted expert on U.S. politics and policy, a resident of Longport, New Jersey. She's deeply committed to her South Jersey community, a passionate teacher. Bridget is committed to increasing students' civic engagement and integrating real-world political experiences into the classroom. A first-generation college graduate, she often mentors students who are in their are the first in their family to attend college. Thank you, Bridget, for being here. I think I saw and heard you there, did I?
I am here, Kelly.
Okay, there you are. Okay, thank you for joining us. I'm going to just have Laurie show this clip real quick of Van Drew. This is when he was questioning the transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, from earlier this year during his confirmation hearings. And then I'll have you respond to some of these questions in that video, okay?
To testify on a subject of interest to all Americans. We're a country of many communities with diverse perspectives. However, there is universal recognition that we must invest in infrastructure if we want to continue American strength and prosperity into the 21st century. First, I want to tell you about my own community, the southern part of New Jersey. We are geographically, economically, and demographically a diverse community. We are the hustle and bustle of tourism and gaming. We are the pinelands and the wetlands. We are the Jersey Shore and the Delaware Bay Shore. We have miles of beautiful coastline and we have thousands of acres of farmland, but we have a common identity as South Jerseyans together. Mr. Secretary, our people need better infrastructure. We need investment in roads, bridges, and dams. We need investment in dredging, broadband, and airports. The investments of this bill could make a generational impact on the South Jersey community. I'm sure that everyone else on this committee feels just as strongly about their community's needs. That leads me to the main point I need to make. This bill needs to be an infrastructure package for all Americans. For years, Washington has talked about infrastructure as the end-all and the be-all of bipartisanship. Now it's our opportunity to show that there is still an American dream and that our country can still unite behind it. We cannot approach this bill like we have, quite frankly, earlier bills this year. There needs to be bipartisanship. There needs to be an investment in all American communities. Our country, the United States of America, needs us. They need us to work together. So, Mr. Secretary, does this administration commit to making this an infrastructure package for all Americans?
Yes, that's absolutely the intent of the president and of my department too. We recognize there are so many different kinds of communities with different needs and different characteristics. And we've got to be serving everybody, and everybody will be better off when we get this country the infrastructure it deserves.
Oh, I just loved how he handles that. Before I pass it along to you, some of the questions we got in regards to this particular topic is, I don't know if you've seen on social media, Jeff keeps pushing the telecommunications legislative package and talking about it as if it's like somehow his idea. But part of it's the understanding that some of that, or mostly that, is in what's already there, the American Jobs Plan. There's aspects of that in there. So the question really is, well, if you support this telecommunications thing, well, with that in mind, will you be supporting the American Jobs Plan? And obviously he talked in that clip about bipartisanship, so hopefully he would be bipartisan in that particular vote. And then the other question that somebody had for him was, what do you feel are the biggest infrastructure needs in South Jersey, and will you be working across the aisle to see them included in the American Jobs Plan? And that's somebody from Atlantic County. So I want to pass it along to you to kind of share your thoughts in regards to this particular topic, and anything you want to share with us. I'd appreciate it.
I mean, this is, to me, one of the most fundamental aspects of Jeff Van Drew's job, because the idea of infrastructure and jobs speaks to the kind of issues that Crystal was talking about in terms of racial equality. It talks to all of the issues that have to do with the economic inequality that our district is experiencing. And the problem is that, in New Jersey, we get 67 cents for every dollar that we send to Washington, D.C. And if you look at South Jersey, we get a fraction of that, right? So we are not just as a state, but as a district subsidizing the entire country. And in the meantime, we have this guy. Somebody in the comments said that it looks like an old-time prison uniform. That is just a spot-on analysis of this wardrobe choice. I don't know what's up with him. But, in what we know is that he can talk about bipartisanship all day and night, but when he is pressured by Republicans in the House of Representatives, which he will be on the American Jobs Act, a $2.3 trillion plan, that has been compared to the New Deal in its scope, that really seeks not just to change the infrastructure of the United States, but also to address those issues of economic inequality. We know that Jeff Van Drew will fold and will vote against it. And Kelly, I wonder, can I share my screen? Is that possible?
Laurie or Judy?
I think you're yes, you're a co-host. You should be able to.
Okay. Try to do that.
I will try. Let's see if this works. Because I think that, I think I succeeded. So when Van Drew's talking about, infrastructure, I will show you, here's what he's talking about, the border wall. So, this is from April 29th. This isn't even during like the highlight of the Trump period. Like, he's talking about the border crisis. And, I've been down in Cape May County. I'm not seeing a huge problem with those Delawareans crossing our border. And I wanted to show you this map too. This is the state of New Jersey, and this is what the SBA uses to indicate poverty status, right? Look at the state of New Jersey, look at our congressional district, and look at how much more poverty we have than the rest of the state. So then look at, there we are. Look at this map at some of our rail infrastructure. So those two things, there's a reason for that, right? People who live in Salem County can't get to Philadelphia for a job. Jobs pay well in Philadelphia. People who live in Jersey City or New York City can't get to Atlantic City to spend their money on restaurants and in our casinos, or down to Cape May for a weekend if they don't own a car. And, you would think that the state kind of ends in Bayhead. So when Van Drew is opposing the American Jobs Act, he's essentially condemning our district to lack of economic development, to continue being amongst the poorest places in the state, to continue the record of economic inequality. And I think that that's important too, because when you look at the 195,000 people who voted for Jeff Van Drew in the last election, it's more than, of course, it was a presidential election, so it was more than the number who voted for him in 2018. But some of those people are motivated because they're like the kind of classic Trump supporters, right? They are primarily white, largely male, non-college educated people who feel left behind in this economy. And the reason that they supported President Trump, some of them, is because they believe his kind of hogwash that he's going to deliver jobs for them. And that's why they were supporting Trump. That's why they were supporting Van Drew. And, as a Democrat, I think it's important that we bring those people, those kind of swing voters who voted for Barack Obama, but also voted for President Trump, back into the Democratic Party, because if we don't, we continue to lose seats like this.
Right. Agree. Yeah. And he seemed to make a big deal about this topic when he was sort of running, but again, it just seems like he's voting against every aspect of what he said he would go there and work on.
You go to the Republican, he's on the infrastructure committee, and if you go to the Republican committee and the House's website, you wouldn't even know that he was, we have representatives in California arguing for their bullet train. You don't see any of his,
right.
There are Republicans that are advocating for their district to get that transportation and infrastructure money. Not one of them.
Right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you joining us and sharing all of that with us. It was good to see you again. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you around, because again, he still is going to be in office for another 2 years. So, it's, that's why we're just going to keep trying to meet with them and hold them accountable on these important issues to us in CD2. So
important events like this, and holding him responsible. That is how you get your representative to be representative.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay. And then we're going to move on to the American Rescue Plan. I know Laura's going to have to load up the slideshow, I think, for you guys. There you go.
To testify on a subject of interest to all Americans. However, universal recognition.
There we go. Okay, thank you. So our guest for tonight on the American Rescue Plan is Gerald Blakely. Gerald is a native from Trenton. He is an associate director of government relations at the NJEA and a lecturer at Rutgers University's School of Management and Labor Relations. Gerald earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in history from Howard University and earned his EDM in the Social and Philosophical Foundations of Education at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, as an Eagleton Institute of Politics Graduate Fellow. Gerald is serving his second term on the Mercer County Board of Social Services and his first term as a Trenton City Councilman at Large. Gerald, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Before we get to some of the questions, I wanted to just point out some of these statistics, and it kind of piggybacks off of what Bridget was sort of talking about too. You know, when Jeff Van Drew voted against the American Rescue Plan, he voted against a lot of things that would, you know, impact our particular district. So when he voted against the plan, he voted against sending $2.5 million to Hamilton Township and millions more to other communities in South Jersey. And as you can see here, 134,000 kids in our district are benefiting from the expanded child tax credit that was included in the bill that he voted against. And so luckily we happen to have control of the House, and therefore, you know, we were able to get these things passed. But it's just sort of amazing that, you know, he's voting against these things that would really help this district out. There's, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. There is, I believe, a couple of questions I have from the, you know, from people, but I don't know if you want to just comment on that particular topic.
Absolutely. I have some prepared remarks that I'll get through that will touch upon Congressman Van Drew's vote against this much needed federal COVID relief. On March 4th, the first New Jerseyan, on March 4th, 2020, the first New Jerseyan was diagnosed with COVID-19. By March 10th, the COVID-19 virus claimed its first New Jerseyan victim. By March 16th, New Jersey began to shut down schools, offices, and businesses in an attempt to stop this dreaded disease. Over the next 15 months, life would change as we know it in the Garden State, with massive unemployment, a record economic carnage, and massive changes in many of our bedrock institutions that impacted every single resident in our state. New Jersey quickly became an international hotspot for this devastating disease, and we were hurting deeply. The New Jersey Education Association knew that big problems required big solutions, and federal COVID relief was just that, a major legislative proposal to confront the many challenges that COVID brought to our society. Our own union created a pandemic relief fund to help hundreds of our members who are suffering from food insecurity. But we didn't stop there. We knew that we needed broad-based federal COVID relief for our fellow countrymen and women. And in the middle of a raging pandemic, tens of thousands of our members contacted all 15 members of our state's congressional delegation, imploring them to swing for the fences to defeat COVID-19 and support much federal needed relief to our children, families, and communities. And however, unfortunately, in the face of the societal wreckage, in the face of so much pain and suffering, Congressman Van Drew voted against much needed federal relief, not just once, but twice. He said no to increased funding to schools, the stimulus checks to struggling families, to child tax credits, and hundreds of billions of dollars to help support colleges, mass transit systems, renters, and small businesses in CD2. The NJEA remembered this past November and did not endorse Congressman Van Drew. We proudly supported Amy Kennedy, who understood the scope of the COVID-19 pandemic and supported much needed COVID-19 federal relief. I want to be very clear, the NJEA has a memory of an elephant, and we will never forget this betrayal of New Jersey's residents and our society in this time of great need. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, you kind of answered some of the questions that were coming in. So as you noted, and even as some of the stats show, so 4 out of the 10 of the poorest towns in all of New Jersey are in his district. And so, you know, somebody wanted to know, why would you vote against the American Rescue Plan that would provide stimulus and other funds to help support Americans during this time? Like, COVID-19 was nobody's, you know, fault. It wasn't your family's fault, my family's fault, right? We were just put in this position, and it was a lot of hardship for people. And, you know, by going against that, it took away. So somebody wanted to kind of know, why would you do that to your constituents? Someone else had asked, I'm appalled, Congressman Van Drew, that during the pandemic, people in your district were out of work, not sure when they would be able to go back to work and provide for their families. You were eating at high price, fancy steakhouses, yet you voted against the American Rescue Plan and put much needed money, that would have put much needed money into the pockets of the residents here. What's interesting about all of this, and I think it might actually be is it an actual clip, Laurie? I'm not even sure. It might not be a clip. But what's interesting is that, you know, while he voted against this particular relief, and he just basically was, you know, it didn't fit his, I guess, I think it was more about the party, but he ended up supporting it in March of 2020. He supported the CARES funding. So why is he changing his mind now? Why is this not good enough to help the residents of this district? And so I think that, again, just goes to, you know, our disbelief that he would put politics or himself in front of the residents here by doing that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that is a clip, is it?
New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Oh, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the pain being felt in South Jersey and in this nation is real. I have listened and I have heard the stories. What we're doing today will soothe some of the pain, but it's just the beginning. America was founded and has thrived with the idea that we are an exceptional nation. We are exceptional, not because of our differences, but because of what unites us in times of adversity. This legislation is a testament to our strength that we show in that unity. While we must maintain a physical distance from one another to slow the curve of our hidden enemy, we must remain closer than ever in our hearts and in our souls to one another. I stand with my colleagues ready to fight this disease, fight for our families, fight for their jobs, and fight to keep our nation. May God bless America, and may God bless all of us as we go forward with our work.
This gentleman yields back.
So that just goes to what I was speaking about, where he supported it really enthusiastically to provide relief to the constituents of his, you know, district. And then all of a sudden now the American Rescue Plan is no good for the residents of CD2. Is there anything you else want to add to that particular aspect?
I would just state that, as I mentioned, you know, everyone realizes that COVID-19 has been, you know, a tremendous blow to our economy and to the normal, you know, functioning of society. And, you know, the American Recovery Plan and federal COVID relief was a big solution to a big problem. And I think that, you know, to be against many of the items in the federal recovery plans that supported families and individuals and institutions is just shameless. And our members at the NJA, spoke very loud and clear when we decided to endorse Amy Kennedy in the CD2 election to really highlight our discontent around his actions. And I would just state also that we're also not pleased either as a national union or a local union with his support of overturning the results of the election. And we were really displeased by that. And nationally, the National Education Association has refused to financially support any congressperson who has, supported folks who have done those dastardly things. Thank you.
Right. No, thank you very much. And it's nice to see organizations stepping up and doing things like that as well, and not just sort of, not just letting it, keep going. So I appreciate you joining us tonight. It is a really important topic because, like you said, the residents of CD2 have been suffering for the last, it feels like a long time, almost a year and a half. We're getting there. But thank you so much, and hopefully I'll see you around. We have one more topic to cover. It's immigration and global affairs. We have Irvin Moreno Rodriguez with us. Irvin is the current co-executive director of El Pueblo Unido of Atlantic City, immigrant rights organization that works in Atlantic County. He's also a member of the organization Azteca, a nonprofit organization in Atlantic City that promotes the traditions, customs, and culture of Mexico in southern New Jersey. Irvin is also founding member of the Hispanic Advocacy Committee for Equity and current advocacy chair of the Hispanic Association of Atlantic County, and vice chair of the Education Committee of the NAACP in the Atlantic City branch. So we have another really busy person with us tonight. Thank you for joining us, Irvin. I'm gonna just read a couple of questions and a couple of statements, and then I'm gonna pass it along to you to kind of comment a little bit on this. We ended up having a couple of questions in regards to the global vaccine distribution and the border crisis. So a resident in Salem County asked, I personally don't, necessarily feel about, we have a border crisis, but if you must, define it as such, what are you doing to support correcting the root cause issues, like helping the refugees' home countries first so that they don't want to flee? Wouldn't correcting the root cause be more beneficial in the long term? And then someone else wanted to know, Congressman, you wrote a statement that no COVID-19 vaccines should be sent to other countries until every American citizen is vaccinated. Have you seen what's happening in India? It's a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, and it's a global pandemic. And it will only be stopped when every country is also able to be vaccinated. Do you feel you are being short-sighted? And that was someone from Cumberland County. Before I pass it on to you, I just want to, a recent statement from Van Drew in regards to the border crisis. He said, the border is complete chaos. It really presents a health problem, a crime problem, a humanitarian problem. This is the situation. It's really unfortunate when the president takes over and actually makes the situation worse by far than it was. We had agreements with Mexico. We had agreements with the Northern Triangle. We were building borders. Every nation must have strong borders if it is to be a strong nation, and we were well on our way. He added he's reversed all of that. We saw all the kids and adults coming over with Biden for president t-shirts on, which was just the only word I have is bizarre. So that's a horrible thing. On March 17th, he questioned Homeland Security Secretary on the crisis in the situation at the southern border. And Jeff Van Drew also made an issue out of the vaccine distribution on March 11th. He said Congress has responsibility to ensure that every American who wants a vaccine can get it before doses are sent to foreign countries. Now is not the time for foreign handouts or public health institutions our public health institutions should continue prioritizing the health and well-being of the American people. This House resolution was signed along with Paul Gosar, Matt Gaetz, and Ronnie Jackson. This is definitely a time to focus on the science and the big picture that the epidemiologists understand, not just knee-jerk reaction politics. So I wanted to add those bits in there because, again, he's not here with us. So we're trying to, in a way, balance it out with having our guests speak, but also putting in his own words so that, as far as we know, these are his thoughts and where he's at. But again, without talking to him or having a town hall, sometimes it's a little bit hard. But if someone would like to unmute Irvin, perhaps we can get his opinion on these particular topics in regards to vaccine distribution and the border situation. Hi, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. It's great to be here tonight with some wonderful panelists. I want to thank everybody for their time, and I want to thank the audience for sticking around just to hear what I have to say. I know it's been a long day of work for everybody and a long night, but I would like to share a PowerPoint if possible. I don't have the co-host capability.
Hang on one second. We'll get somebody to do that for you.
Beth, can you do that?
Yes, I'm looking for.
He's up at the top of the participant list. We'll go ahead and take care of that if you want to
Okay,
get
you should
started.
be able to. You should be able to do share now.
Great, thank you. So can you see the presentation for the PowerPoint? Kelly, anybody?
Yes, yes, it looks great.
All right, thanks. So I'm a visual learner and it's late at night and I don't want to just speak to everyone because I could already see the numbers dwindling on the audience list. And I'm sorry that they missed this presentation, but I'll try to be very brief. I know that we don't have a lot of time left. Like I said, I'm a visual learner. So I don't think that we do sort of a due diligence on how our representatives vote. In this particular case, Representative Jeff Van Drew. So on the left hand of your screen, you should be seeing at the beginning, Bill S699. Now this is when he was representing us in New Jersey. So that's why the shape is different. And this bill was just to give or to put in place a structure for financial aid for primarily undocumented students in New Jersey. And this was passed in April 12th, 2018. And Van Drew voted for this. So when he was running, a really salient moment was when I went to a fundraiser for another candidate and Van Drew shows up and he starts speaking in Spanish to us. And it was like, oh, okay, it sort of caught my attention, right? And then obviously fast forward, here we are. So on the left-hand side, you can see, in green is where he voted yes. In red is where he voted no. There's one resolution that's in purple. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But graphically, there's a big shift, right? It's almost like the complete opposite after the big star that you see in the middle of your screen. Now, for everyone in the audience, if you want to put in the chat, what do you think that date represents? December 19th, 2019. I don't have any prizes, but the first one gets, I don't know, a magical pencil from me or something. What does that date represent? I can't see the chat. So I don't know.
Is that what he was in? Oh, yeah, I don't want to guess. Well, let's see if someone puts in the chat. I can't see it.
I think Benjamin. I saw Benjamin. Benjamin, I think you're right. Yes.
Okay.
So December 19th, 2019 is when he made the official, I guess, declaration to switch parties. And you see this complete shift. Now, this is just a summary of how he's voted on resolutions regarding immigration, right? This is not in total encompassing, but you can see it's like the complete opposite right? With all those resolutions in red, and there's one immigration resolution that he's voted for yes, that he's actually co-sponsored, which I can talk a little bit in a little bit. So the first one that the first sort of immigration issue that we see here when he is voted into Congress is the American Dream and Promise Act of 2019. Now, what's really funny to me is that a couple years later, right, we have a similar resolution, HR 6, the American Dream and Promise Act of 2021, and it's a total 360 where he voted no. The reasons, I don't know. I have personally reached out to his office. I do want to state that very clearly on some of his voting habits and why he's voted yes or no. But I haven't received a response, and I think this town hall is very telling as well. Another thing that I do want to point out is the House Resolution 1153 that was voted on October 2nd, 2020. Now, this wasn't just a normal piece of legislation. If you can put in the chat, why do you think I'm highlighting this specifically? Where did this sort of condemnation come from? Does anybody remember? October 2nd, 2020 in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. Anybody remember that? I think Lori knows. Lori? All right, so earlier, before that resolution in October, we had a nurse at the Irwin County Detention Facility in Atlanta, Georgia, that was a whistleblower that alleged that immigration officials were letting particularly Black and Latina Hispanic women, they were being, they had surgeries like hysterectomies that were unauthorized. They didn't understand the language. They didn't understand what was going on. And so when the whistleblower sort of alleged that, right, we had this condemnation from the House that came out that, it's the titles right there, condemning unwanted, unnecessary medical procedures on individuals without their full informed consent. I did reach out. I remember when I believe it was either the Washington Post or the New York Times that broke the story. When that happened, I do remember calling Van Drew's office, and they said that they would get back to me with a response. I'm still waiting, almost a year later, right? So what's so interesting is when you look at this graphic, September 26, 2019, there is a bill that's brought up, 3525, the U.S. Border Patrol Medical Screening Standards Act, which specifically talks about putting procedures in place so that this does not happen. And he voted against it. And that is just, it's immoral. It's wrong. And for me, it's I have family that are immigrants to this country, some who may not speak English as well as their neighbor, but to vote no on something that could have been prevented, right? To change the course of history for these women that were affected. And these allegations are true. Mexico has confirmed that they call them citizens, that their citizens have had unauthorized surgery on them. Right? People, women who can no longer have children, who have further medical issues for these surgeries. It's just so immoral, that vote in 2019. And look what happened, right? Just barely a year later. And so I still haven't gotten an answer on these yes or no's. Now, the HR 1603, which is the Farm Workforce Modernization Act of 2021, we should be paying attention to, just because it does give a pathway to residency and citizenship for, they call them certified agricultural workers. So you might see the acronym CAW. I don't like to use the word CAW, but I'm assuming people are going to start calling it CAW. So basically, agricultural workers who work, I think, a minimum of 20 hours every week for a year are able to apply, if this bill passes, for this status that would obviously defer their deportation. and offer them a pathway to residency and then citizenship, as well as their spouse and children if need be. So that's something to look forward to. This was also co-sponsored by Jeff Van Drew, but it wouldn't be a surprise if he switches his vote, because I don't think a lot of people are necessarily paying attention too much, but it seems like when issues are in the news and they become sort of, different, I guess, political channels, right? You have CNN, Fox News. He seems to vote the way that people who support Trump want him to vote. So there's more to this presentation. Obviously, I know that we don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to touch a little bit on that vaccine question. I'm not a medical expert at all, but I do know that the United States has a history of helping other countries, right? You're talking more specifically, let's talk about the polio vaccine that I know a little bit offhand, right? In 2019, I believe Obama, was a change in force for Muslim countries in sort of sending the polio vaccine and the infrastructure teams to sort of dispense the polio vaccine. Unfortunately, it is coming back for countries with low economic resources. They use a type of polio vaccine that is weakened, but not sort of dead or killed, if I can talk in that fashion, right? Again, I'm not a medical expert. So when they use this weakened vaccine in low income areas where there's low nutritional sort of, grades among the population, unfortunately that weakened polio can take the body and end up paralyzing the child. So this is going on now. So, and then we can talk about USAID, right? They've been putting in infrastructure for polio in Latin American countries, right? So the U.S. Has been a leader on other vaccines. I hope that the Biden administration continues to be a leader. I know that there was some pressure. Initially, the Biden administration was hesitant to send the vaccine to, let's say, India, but they have sent vaccine doses to Mexico and Canada. And now they've done a reversal with India. I think they're about to send 10% of American vaccines over to India just because of the situation that's so dire. And like I said, regarding the U.S. Border Patrol Medical Screening Standards Act, what a terrible way to vote. Really, I don't understand. There's no explanation to explain that vote, and look what happened. Literally a year later. And so I'm going to pause it there because I know we're running out of time. But thank you for giving me the platform to talk about immigration, Kelly. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. This was really informative. Even like your diagram there, it's nice. Like, I'm a visual learner too, so that was very helpful to kind of just see it laid out there like that. And it's unfortunate that he chose the wrong sides on many of these particular votes. But I do really appreciate your time and all of the other guests that we had tonight and everyone that stuck with us. We didn't get to any of the additional questions we kept track of, but kind of what do we do from here after hearing all this information? Calling Jeff Van Drew. I'm also, I think, blacklisted. I don't get a call back when I call anymore. So I used to get calls back when he was a Democrat. Now I don't get them back. So, but making phone calls, leaving messages, writing op-eds, letters to editors, things like that on these important topics would be really, really important. So from here, if you see this information, that's his DC number, his New Jersey number, and then you can follow us on all our social media places: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, at Who Is Van Drew. And then we'll hopefully be able to keep doing some more things, and we'll maybe make another attempt to do a town hall with him and see if we have any better luck. But like mentioned before, we're going to keep trying to hold him accountable for his votes, because he ultimately answers to the residents of CD2. So I really appreciate everybody's time. I don't know if anyone else from the Who Is Van Drew team has any other comments or questions. I know everyone is probably tired. It's been a long day. We good, Laurie? We good, Judy?
Yep,
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm.
I think Judy put in the chat, stay tuned. We're planning a flip-flop
Oh.
rally, I think, in the future outside of his office. And I saw another group today did a chicken dance outside of their rep's office. So just because there's such a chicken, they can't.
It's going to be warm, right? Warmer weather, flip-flops. There you go.
Yeah, but keep following
Vaccines.
us, you know, because we're going to be out there and holding them accountable as much as we can. And we're going to need all of your support to do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, thank you to all of our guests and people that came to participate. Really appreciate it. It was great to see you and meet you, and hopefully we'll be in touch. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank